Adjusting a plan is kind of a similar behavior over the course of a project. You know, we set a goal, you assemble a plan, you work through all of the different connections to build it, and you start executing them, and then you start seeing results and you monitor progress, and you're always learning those things that you don't expect to know when they come in. You adjust the plan, and this is a cycle that needs to have that foundation of communication and the willingness for people to confront those pieces of information as they come in and question whether or not the plan needs to adjust. In my experience, even in industry, that is really difficult. There are times that we learn things that maybe we don't want to learn because it changes the plan that we had, and we really liked the plan that we had, and we liked the outcome we were going for, and we didn't really want to know that. So, but really a healthy team needs to be confident enough to be able to really look at that piece of information, look at all of those pieces of information that come at you, and be ready to talk about whether they have an effect on your plan, and if they do, what's the effect and what do you need to do? You work through this, and if you've been able to take in and adjust and move around related to those pieces of information, this will get you to your completion. But let's talk a little bit more about the kinds of adjustments and the kinds of things that will come up. You know, we're talking about losses of access to resource, any kind of a resource in that case, unexpected results, things it didn't occur to us that that might happen, and now we see that it happens, and so what do we do? Equipment failures, staff changes are another form of, you know, an event that, you know, it's funny that you don't think about it, but yet you should, because, I mean, I don't know if any of you have been in one role or job your entire lives, but, you know, at times when we plan as if that's the case, and then life comes along and people have to, you know, people change jobs, people find opportunities at other institutions and shift, or, you know, people fall ill, you know, you have to adjust for those as well. So let's talk a little bit about some things that we do to adjust for those internal events. So a new technical lead is assigned to a project. You know, what do you think the impact is in those scenarios or situations? And how would a team adjust based on that? To a certain extent, it's almost like starting over, because you've got a new person. They may not know anything about what the whole point of the project was, and it's best to just sit down and start over and present it to them as, well, this is what we're trying to do, as if they know nothing, and see how they respond, and then consider that and determine, okay, well, based on this person who's probably going to have a strong perspective related to how we're executing the work, if this was the plan and they're not comfortable with the plan, you know, how do we adjust for that? And that's definitely something that you want to do as soon as that happens, you know, so you can get back to that alignment and have that support of the person, and have that person feel confident that they understand what they've taken on here. Here's another type of a thing that I encounter in industry. But, you know, so I worked for Boston Scientific. Boston Scientific is one of several companies that sells uterine meshes. And these are devices that have been around for 30, 40, some odd years. But in recent years, they've been getting a lot of scrutiny related to clinical outcomes, and there have been a bunch of lawsuits that Boston Scientific has been subjected to, as well as other companies that make these kinds of products. And because of that activity, the FDA has been looking at this and scrutinizing and questioning whether the regulatory classification of those devices is appropriate, whether they should be requiring clinical study to commercialize or not. And there hasn't been a final decision, but let's say you're at one of these companies and you're developing a technology in this space, and you thought you could commercialize and get into regulatory approval in one direction, but now you're starting to hear the bar might be up. So, you know, what do you do in this scenario? So really consider, well, okay, well, what's the potential, you know, worst case, or what is the FDA considering? What's the range of what they could be considering, and how would it affect my current plan? What else would I need to execute? And I've definitely seen some companies, in the face of that kind of uncertainty, will actually start in parallel a couple of teams working on things. So if they believe they may need a clinical trial that they weren't planning for originally, they may have a team start working on it even if it's not decided, so that you can get to that point and you've got that piece. If you have the resources to do that, that's great. Another thing you might need to do is consider that and then bring in other perspectives on the likelihood. Find experts in the space that can give you a read on potentially the likelihood or what are the other things that you may want to watch for to know whether you need to consider making a change when you want to try to make the change. In some cases, it could be possible that whatever you're developing doesn't need to change. And that can be hard too. It can be very tempting sometimes to hear these things and start immediately jumping to a conclusion and saying, well, we're going to have to do all of this now. And sometimes you don't. Sometimes everybody gets through and you learn, oh, actually the regulatory classification has been determined to be appropriate. So knowing and thinking about what could be required and then also having that understanding of, well, what are the points that we should, wait to know whether we really need to go in that direction or not, especially when you're managing limited resources, are the two things to bring into play and manage in a part of your project. So.